Hi, this is you this is Jesus is Black, gamertag koonchos, and yeah, sure. I'm gonna take a little break from making tutorials and want to show you something different. What we're gonna talk about here, what this video is about, something I like to call FPS theory. Yeah, my handwriting's really messy because I'm like a left-hander and I'm like looking at the camera and trying to write. But yes, anyway, basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be taking some principles in mathematics, not really number stuff for all people who hate math, but just, rules. What we're going to be doing is carrying over some elements of game theory, something like called game theory, which is basically the mathematics of strategy. It's about, basically learning how to, basically taking problem solving and moving it over to pretty much a setting where it all boils down to strategy and, basically treating everything as a complication or as something that needs to be eliminated or done. It's about knowing basically all the different things you can do in the game as far as like on your end and dealing with stuff on the other people's end and implementing that. Which brings me to another thing we're going to cover. We're going to one thing you have to know, and this pretty much applies to anything, but I'm going to try to carry it over this to a game. It's about knowing the most, or really knowing all there is to something, as far as techniques wise, and where they apply and where they don't apply. Just thinking very contextually, and of course keeping things sort of general and abstract, so you have some sort of expertise and you have a good intuition for things. Which is something else I'm going to bullet for you. Knowing the most and applying all you know. No, or in other words, the strategy, which is the strategy of all strategy, is research. So I'm going to say this boils down to something called research and destroy. Probably a very familiar term with all of you. But yes. And we're going to work with the limitation of fair play. We're not going to resort to cheating, and even though, yes, cheating is something you can do, and hacking and modding and all that stuff is something you can do, we are not going to pander to any of that sort of stuff, because it really does ruin gaming. Like, sometimes you just don't want to play with cheats and stuff. That should be, there should be strictly, if you're going to cheat or mod, just go into a cheating and modding lobby somewhere, or go on Xbox Connect where you won't get kicked off or something. Or some private network or whatever where you're not gonna get yourself in trouble. And of course, do not go into a regular game and start cheating and modding and stuff, unless everyone's finding it funny and everything or whatever. Either way, yes. So basically, we're gonna come up with like a general strategy to pretty much all FPS games, hence FPS theory, or yes, or general FPS strategy. Actually, cross it out. Write down what this is really bad. General FPS strategy. And another thing we're going to focus on is building an intuition for gaming, which is very important. It's about having a very good sort of cartoonized idea of the game in your head that you can use and sort of extrapolate strategies with, thinking about different situations and how to deal with them, and basically not about proper uses of everything, but really the limitations and how far you can take everything in the game. So building an intuition for gaming, and which is going to be important for everything. You, without even knowing it, build an intuition for, I don't know, working a cash register at a job or whatever, or doing sales or anything. Before you do anything, you have an idea of how to do it. That just goes without saying. So there's basically no function without education, is what I'm saying, and I'm right. Yes, I'm gonna write that too. I am right. Just kidding. I'm not really that serious about being right. I don't care. I'm more interested in learning about stuff. But yes, so when you have an SPS game, generally as we can and as effectively as we can, and pretty much to the most effectiveness, you have what's called a map. You have an enclosed space where you play, and you have different features and whatnot. You might have a hill, so I guess we add some topography to this, blah blah blah. This is going to be our general symbol for topography, and this is going to be like our highest point right here. H for high point, L for lower points, and the rule is H is always greater than L, H as a direct representation of height. That is a rule right here. And you know, you have the other features of the map, and back everything up so you can see it. You have buildings, walls, whatever. Even vehicles, you know, that could be temporary cover, of course. They do blow up, and they're not really safe to stand around, but, you know, they're good as a sort of, as a temporary thing, you know, buy yourself some time to reload. And now that we're on the topic of reloading, we're going to talk about implementations of all this stuff. We're going to work on the implementations of everything, and I know a lot of people say this is good for this is good for that. That's really BS. You know, I've seen everyone do things with pretty much everything. I've seen people use grenades to switch weapons and whatnot. And yeah, so I'm gonna give you the real rundown of like how FPS gaming works, and I'm not gonna bullshit you. Yes, so you have maps, and you know, one thing you'll notice automatically about walls is that pretty much because of the way the server works, most of the time they will work. You know, sometimes your bullets will go through, whatever, or, you know, if you're playing Halo or whatever, you'll have people who can temporarily see through walls, which you can ask me is fucking bullshit, and people, you know, who use recon drones or whatever, or some sort of vehicle with a air vehicle with a camera where they can see everything and whatnot in Modern Warfare, like Predator missiles or UAVs or whatever. So yeah, so 99% of the time these will keep you safe. And, you know, you have roofs, of course, which are, you know, sometimes invincible, sometimes not. But basically the functions of these protect you. Protection, buying time also. I'm just going to write plus time. And yes, you know, it's all fun and dandy to know about, you know, what these do, but you have to talk about, you know, the context. There are restrictions as to like when these work and when these don't. Obviously, walls and whatnot only work when there's something, you know, when the wall is separating you between an attacker, you know, between like a flurry of bullets, like where your attacker's looking and everything and whatnot, or shooting, of course. Roofs will only work if you have a, you know, a helicopter or whatever. Flying on top of it. Here's a little helicopter thing. I'm so bad with drawing. That's our helicopter right there. Here's the little things that the helicopter lands on right there. The legs of the helicopter, or whatever. So yeah. So we have our limitations for walls. I mean, sorry. The context, or really the context of where the walls are appropriate. So if when they are separating you. And, you know, this works for, like, separation between bullets and explosions. Separating between player and damage-causing elements. Yes, that's a good word. And that is what I'm thinking of when I say that is basically I'm talking about explosions or, you know, recon drones that are looking for a target or whatever, or Predator missiles are looking for a target or whatever is going to attack you. Also talking about flurries of bullets too, because, you know, those will always, you know, screw you up and whatnot. So yes, that's the first thing we have. And, you know, you're going to have to, like, use your imagination when if you want to extrapolate more context where these work and everything. Of course, you can get down to infinite detail and you get like all these different situations, which is fine. I mean, if you have the time to do that, definitely do that, and that will only help you and give you more knowledge. You know, knowledge is only going to back you up more. Knowledge is sponsorship when it comes to, like, you know, pretty much everything. But since we're talking about gaming, you know, it's going to be sponsorship when it comes to gaming. Now, what there are also now. If you haven't realized, pretty much everything in-game can be used for something. You even have, I don't know, color differences between players. These should be treated as indicators. They tell you what you're hitting, what you should be hitting, what you should watch out for. You know, as without a doubt. These color indicators only work, obviously, when they are visible. So yes, you also have radar, which is good for spotting enemies. Usually the radar will reveal enemies when they're shooting, sometimes when they're not. If you have a certain power-up or whatever, you have the game set in a certain way. Um, yes, and pretty much, as far as like context where the radar is appropriate, it's pretty much at all times. I mean, because like if you look through like different gaming settings, through like an infinitesimal amount of different situations, that thing's gonna constantly lighting up with like enemies and whatnot, and like where players are. So as far as context go, I wouldn't be worrying about when the players are because they usually they might have that area of the map covered, they might not. It's all dependent on where everything's. What you do is going to be dependent on where you go, and where you attack is going to be dependent on what your radar is telling you. Um, yes, and of course, because the radar exists for every player, and most of the time, you can. There's a guarantee that everyone's going to be seeing you at all times. That means you do not stay in one place at the same time. That's definitely something that should be used with the presence of a radar if you have it turned on in the game. Of course, there'll be times when you don't have a radar turned on, and then that's when your indicators come in. Basically, if you're playing, you should always be implementing some part of the game at all times. There shouldn't there should never be if you're playing, you should never really be away from the game. And I'm not saying that you should be playing constantly. I'm not saying because games are amazing. It's just it's just really a counter objective if you do that sort of thing. You want to constantly be working out something to do. It is a constant thinking sort of thing. Even if it's not an active sort of thing, your brain is still pretty active in video games. Um, but yeah. So what else do you have? Of course, guns. Now, as far as practicality is concerned, yeah, you can say, each gun has their limitations. You can use, for example, grenades at certain distances, blah, blah, blah. But which yes, which is obvious. But you could always practice with these guns or whatever on your own, and you could pretty much use them at all ranges. You see people using snipers up close. Some shotguns work at medium distance and whatnot if you get enough shots in and use your cover properly. So yeah, that goes without saying. As far as context for guns, well, you have the factor of distance. You have the factors of your whatever guns you know about are on the map, like in your enemy's hands. Guns in players' hands, and what's it called? Yeah, that's pretty much it. What's it called? What was I gonna say? Yeah, so when it comes to using guns, using gun choice, I mean, optimally, if you want to basically practice a lot with these guns, do a lot of target practice, get some experience and whatnot, maybe practice with your friends, or sort of drill or whatever, come up with your own drills. There's pretty much a drill for anything you can think of doing, which is, a very good rule to know. But optimally, if you were to use a better gun than the guns that your enemies have all the time, you would always win. I mean, optimally, you could just jump in a vehicle if you're playing Battlefield or whatever, or Halo or whatever, and you could just tank the whole map all the time, which is okay. But like when it comes to fair play, which is one of the things we were talking about earlier, it's really not something you want to do. That will get you avoided, and people will routinely complain about you and everything, and no one will ever want to play with you. You could say goodbye to all your private games and everything because everyone's going to think you're an asshole. You might have some 5-year-old kid or whatever that finds you funny online, but that's really not worth shit. No offense to any kids out there, but really, I mean, how fun it is to play with a 5-year-old. Yes. So what else about guns? So the context when they're appropriate. It's basically, I know this sounds really ambiguous, but it's wherever you can hit. And what I'm talking about is, when you have a player behind a penetrable wall, behind a penetrable wall, and because some guns aren't effective in close range, won't shoot straight in your close range. For example, like some snipers in Modern Warfare, it's when it's pretty much it's also in places where accuracy is permitting, like basically when you're zoomed in or whatever. or when your crosshair bloom is gone, if you're like spraying from the hip or whatever, or not unloading too much with a full automatic and like you're looking down the sight or whatever. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers guns. What else is in the map? I mean, everything else is like pretty much all we have left is to like really deal with is grenades. And these of course are only